So these key days are the days we're going to look at. In Catholic and Church of England traditions, they have a day called Ash Wednesday, Maundy Thursday, Good Friday, and Easter Sunday. Now, Protestants don't tend to celebrate Ash Wednesday or Maundy Thursday, but they do celebrate Good Friday and Easter Sunday because they believe those are the most important days, because that's the day of Jesus' death and Jesus' resurrection. Now, on Ash Wednesday, it's really, really interesting. It's the first sort of, it's the Wednesday of that Holy Week. If you go to a service at church, you would normally, the priest would smudge an ash cross on your forehead. In the olden days, back in the days of Jesus, if you had done something wrong and you were really, 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 really sorry, you would do two things. You would, number one, rip off all your clothes. You would, what they call render your clothes. You would tear your clothes and expose your chest to show how sorry you were. And you would cover yourself in ashes. So whether it's the ashes from wood, but you would get ashes and you would rub your face in ashes and rub your arms in ashes, rub your hair in ashes, and you would cover yourself in a cloth, in a sackcloth, in like a dirty cloth, and you would cover yourself in ashes and sackcloth, and you would sit there and you would pray and you would ask for forgiveness for the things you've done wrong. It was a physical sign to show an inward feeling that you have done something wrong and you were repentant and you were sorry for it. And so you would have your body covered in ash, your hair, your hands, your feet, absolutely every part of your body covered in ash, and you would put on this cloth. And it's a physical sign of remorse for sin. Catholics obviously don't cover themselves in ash because that tradition, people don't practice it as much. But what the priest will do is he would make the sign of the cross with ash on your forehead, again to show that penance, that regret, remorse for the sins that you have committed. And obviously the sign of the cross is symbolic to show that you have been forgiven of that sin. The ash represents the things you've done wrong, and the cross represents the forgiveness of God for the thing you've done wrong. Maundy Thursday is the day before Good Friday. So it's where Jesus has his last meal, his Passover meal, with his closest friends and his followers. And this is where he initiates the Eucharist, the bread and wine. And he says to them, eat this body in remembrance of me and drink this wine in remembrance of me. And he says, the bread is my flesh and the wine is my blood. Drink and eat of it. Partake in me. Do this with me and be a part of me. And then we have Good Friday, which focuses on his death and the sacrifice of his death. And then Easter Sunday, which is the most exciting times for Christians, which is the resurrection. This is where Jesus dies on the cross, but he doesn't stay dead, he comes back. And this is possibly the most significant point in all of Christian history, because Jesus doesn't stay dead, he comes back alive, showing that he has defeated death, he has forgiven mankind for their sins, and now he controls life and death. He decides who lives forever and who doesn't. Okay, so let's just look at Maundy Thursday a bit closer. Again, same questions. I'd like you to take a few minutes. Why is this day remembered and recognized? What do they show about the Messiah? How is it celebrated? And why is it important? Pause the video now. Okay, so really key things here to take in. Just have a look at these. So during this Last Supper where Jesus shares the bread and the wine with his disciples, he just doesn't share the bread and the wine with his disciples. He tells them, partake of it, become one with me, become a part of me. But then he gets on his knees and washes their feet. And he washes the feet of the disciples, each and every single one of them. And actually one of his disciples, when he's about to wash their feet, goes, "No, you will not wash my feet. I don't want you to wash my feet." And Jesus says, well, if you don't let me wash your feet, then I don't want anything to do with you, and you have nothing to do with me. And this disciple goes, all right, Jesus, look, not just my feet, but my hands and my face and my hands, wash all of me. And this is Jesus saying to them, I am the most senior one out of everyone in this group. I am the Messiah. If we were going to rank it in importance, I am the most important one here. But I am going to wash your feet because I am the most important one. But I'm not important for being important's sake. I'm important because I'm here to serve you. I'm here for you. My role is important for you. So let me serve you. And he washes their feet. And this was a really powerful moment for his disciples because they often argued about, which one of them was the greatest and which one of them, did Jesus love the most, or which one of them, was the best one. And Jesus squashes all that by going, well, I'm the best one, but I'm going to wash your feet. And please, don't think about feet like we think about it now. Nowadays we have socks and trainers. So the worst thing that comes is, you've got stinky feet. You've got cheesy feet. And that's the worst, you will see. We're talking about, in a society where everyone wore sandals. So, these people's feet are not just, they're not even cheesy. They're dusty, dirty, crusty. Crusty feet with, sores and bunions. They don't have Nike Air Cushion Max. They've just got leather. They're walking on leather and hard leather. And actually, their feet's going to be bruised and their feet's going to be very, very dirty. Jesus gets on his knees and washes their dirty feet. And he washes their dirty feet to show them, number one, this is what you need to do for each other. This is what you need to do for each other. And this is what you need to do for other people. Because he knows he's about to die. He knows he's about to be crucified. And so that's what happens. And he does this because he wants to show his disciples a really, really key message. That the Messiah is there to serve people, not to be served. The Messiah is not an arrogant person, but are there as a person who is meant to be a role model, who is going to serve the community and serve the people around them. In Roman Catholic tradition, on this day in the church, the priest will get on his knees and wash the feet of 12 different people. He'll wash the feet of 12 different people in the congregation to symbolize the way Jesus washed 12 feet of his 12 disciples. And also they will take the bread and the wine in service to represent Jesus' act of saying, here is my body, here is my blood, take this and remember me. But it's important because actually it reminds Christians of God's willingness to give Jesus up and to sacrifice Jesus. Even though Jesus knew somebody was going to betray him, he still washed their feet. Even though he knew somebody was going to betray him and stab him in the back, he didn't treat them different. He still treated them the same. It teaches the spirit of humility, of spirit and of mind towards one another, but it really teaches Christians to serve one another and to serve other people. And that's a really, really important message from Maundy Thursday. We have Good Friday. Now, this is where Jesus dies on the cross. I would like you to take a couple of minutes. What do these things teach us and what do we understand? So pause the video now. Okay, great. So, really important thing. The crucifixion is remembered on this day. Okay, this is the day Jesus died. It showed about the Messiah that he was willing to be obedient to God even to the point of death. So Jesus was willing to be obedient to God even if it cost him his life. Now that's quite significant because for Christians, they feel as though, yes, I want to be obedient to God. Yes, I want to listen to God. But it can't kill me. It can't destroy me. Jesus goes, no, actually, I'm going to be obedient to God till the point of death. And that's quite an important thing. That's quite a powerful message there for Christians to understand and recognize about the Messiah. The Messiah is there because he's showing people that I'm going to listen to God at all cost. I'm going to do what God tells me to do at all cost. Even to the point where it's going to cost me my life. I'm going to die. But yes, I'm going to die, but you are going to live. And you will live in the resurrection once, or you will live because I have forgiven you of the sins that you have committed. And that's quite a powerful thing for Christians to remember. Sorry, just gone off, we'll bring it back. Here we are. So Jesus was willing to give his life for all humanity, and Jesus was willing to be obedient to God to the point of death. Now, how is it celebrated in a service? Well, on this day, Catholics and some Christian Protestants have a church service, and they have this thing called the Stations of the Cross. They have these images, and these images show the different aspects of the crucifixion. And what Christians tend to do, the 14 stations, they have 14 images that show 14 different parts of, the passion, the crucifixion of Christ, from when he was arrested in the Garden of Gethsemane and betrayed by Judas, to the point where he died on the cross. They have these images, and so what Christians, Catholics do, they will go to these different stations. We call them the Stations of the Cross. They will go to these different stations and reflect and pray on his sacrifice and think about what he did and why he did it. And it reminds them of God's redeeming acts. Now, this is really, really key. It reminds them that even though humanity got it wrong at the start, God, right from the beginning, wanted to save them. He wanted to redeem them. It is the greatest act that God has performed apart from creation towards humanity. It reminds them that without this sacrifice, they would have been eternally condemned in their sin. It reminds them, Christians, of God's mercy, God's love, and it allows them to reflect on how God suffered for humanity. A lot of people feel as though God is not there to help them when things go wrong. Well, actually, Good Friday sort of changes all that. It goes, well, not only is God there with you when things go wrong, but he actually gave himself to cover the cost, to atone for your sin when everything went wrong. And so Jesus is not, God is not some person sitting far away. He's actually someone that comes into humanity and deals with sin to save mankind. He suffers with humanity. He feels the pain humanity feels. He feels the torture humanity feels. And that makes him a lot more personable. It makes it, Jesus connects with the pain humanity has. He connects with that pain. He knows of that pain because he himself has endured that pain. And that's what Christians take away. That is really, really key when understanding the importance of Good Friday for Christians. Both Catholics and Protestants would not even argue on that point there, because it's the same for both of them. The sacrifice of Jesus is something that nobody debates within Christianity. And we're going to move on. We're going to move on to this last point on Easter Sunday. And we look at why it's remembered. What did it show about the Messiah? Just pause the video and take a couple of moments and go through this. Pause the video now. Okay. So, again, Easter Sunday is really, really key. It's remembered because of the resurrection. The resurrection is remembered because it's the idea that Jesus becomes victorious over death and sin. He deals with the issue of sin on the cross, and then instead of dying and staying dead, he comes back and is alive. So he contains life, he is life, he is powerful. It shows that Jesus was the Messiah. The prophecy about the Messiah was that he would die for all of humanity, and he would come back, and that he would be with God, and that he was God, and all this other stuff. Who dies and comes back? The resurrection showed that Jesus was the Messiah. It showed that Jesus was God, because God can't be killed. It shows that Jesus overcame death itself, and the power of death and the power of sin was now subject to Jesus. This was really important when we talked about the resurrection. When we looked at the life of Jesus, we talked about this idea that the wages of sin is death. So, if there is sin in a place, it means someone's going to have to pay that price. Someone's going to have to die. Well, Jesus is the one that takes away the sin of all of mankind for all of eternity. He dies, but he comes back to life. And he comes back to life because he is God, and God cannot be killed. But what God does do is he comes, takes the sin of mankind, deals with the sin of mankind, and comes back. Roman Catholic, Church of England and Orthodox churches, they tend to hold a vigil the night before, on the Saturday before the Sunday. And as it goes into 12 o'clock or the next day, as it goes into 12 p.m, the day of the resurrection, the priest would say, "Christ our light," and the congregation will reply, "Thanks be to God." And at that moment where it goes into the next day, they will tend to hold candles. They will hear the salvation story. They will retell the story, and they will sing songs of celebration regarding the death and regarding the resurrection of Jesus. And this is quite an interesting moment, because it's a time of celebration. It's a time where Jesus's death and sacrifice is celebrated. It's remembered, and that's quite key. And actually, some Christians, to be honest with you, most Christians would consider this day to be the most important day, because it celebrates the resurrection of Jesus and that humanity has been saved by God. The crucifixion was massively important. Monday, Thursday, the washing of the feet is massively important. Easter Sunday signifies the fact that not only has Jesus died for the sins of mankind, but he's resurrected. And so now humanity is saved by Jesus. And that is key for Christians, both Protestants, and again, Protestants and Catholics and Roman Catholics on this day. Now it's interesting because specifically on this day, Roman Catholic will have liturgy, Orthodox will have liturgy. Protestants would also have a service. They might take communion on this day and do mass. Catholics will do mass on this day. Protestants would have Holy Communion. They would celebrate. It's a time of celebration and joy, because Jesus has finally raised from the dead. Okay, so the last lesson we looked at was pilgrimage. What I'd like you to do is I'd like you to look at these 7 questions on pilgrimage, and I'd like you to respond to these 7 questions on pilgrimage. Take about 6 minutes to do these. Pause the video now. Okay, so let's go through the answers really quickly. I'm not going to go through all of them. So we know what a pilgrimage is: a journey to a holy site. The word, what we mean by devotion, is utterly dedicated in worship and service to God. 4 things pilgrimages do: they pray, they reflect, they seek, and they help others. 2 popular places will be Walsingham, Tays, Lourdes, and Jerusalem. Ecumenical, we mean when a collection of many denominations come together. Now that's really important, that word, because it's going to come up over and over again. And one of the things when we were looking at pilgrimage, we said that Tays is an ecumenical community. They're a community made up of many Christians from many different denominations. What's the difference between Tays and Walsingham in their spiritual connection? Tays is about the monastic life, living a life of minimalism and reflecting and concentrating on God. Walsingham is associated with miracles and visitations. People go there to pray and ask God for things based on what has happened there before. Why is Jerusalem a sacred site? Well, it's the holy city. It's the holiest city. And it's always been the holy city. It was once where the temple stood. Jews had the temple, their focus of worship, the number one place that they all went to connect with God. It was called the Temple of Solomon. Huge place where they would all go and concentrate all their spiritual efforts, all their spiritual energy to this one place. In fact, if you were a Jew and you were living outside of Jerusalem, once a year you would come to Jerusalem. You would all pilgrimage to Jerusalem to come and worship at this great temple. Well, Jerusalem is where the great temple stood. It once stood. And in that temple was the Ark of the Covenant, this box that was said to contain the physical presence of God, or the physical manifestation of God on the earth in the form of a cloud and in the form of the Ten Commandments. And so inside this box, it was said that God's Spirit was in this room that they would refer to as the holiest of all rooms. They would call it the Holy of Holies. But in this covenant, in this ark, this box, the sacred box, were the Ten Commandments. And that was the law that God gave to Moses and all of Israel, to live right and to be right, and and to walk with God and live righteous lives. So, Easter Sunday, just a quick timeline to sort of round up. We've got Palm Sunday, Monday. I've put the Tuesday and Wednesday as well. We've got Monday, Thursday, where Jesus' Last Supper and his betrayal and his by Judas. We've got Good Friday, where he's killed. Saturday, where his body is laid in a tomb. And Easter Sunday, where he rises from the dead. Now, in the Roman Catholic and Orthodox churches, the celebration begins just before midnight, as we said earlier, and people go outside, leaving the church in darkness. Now, as the congregation, I want you to imagine this, as the congregation waits outside the church, the priest shouts out, "Christ is risen!" And then the doors of the church are open, and everyone lights a lamp, and everyone lights a candle, and they pass it to each other, and they bring light into this darkened church. That is incredibly symbolic of what they believe Jesus Christ does through the death and his resurrection. Jesus Christ is this light, and he brings light into this darkened world, and then this world is illuminated. A large candle called the Paschal candle is carried through the church. There's a large candle, and it's a symbol of the light of Jesus, that Jesus has risen. It's a symbol of light shining in darkness. It is a symbol of triumph over death. Sometimes they baptize people on this day, symbolizing new life. But this is how this Easter Sunday is celebrated with real symbolic meaning of light and darkness, and praise and calling out. And then they take the communion. They take the bread and wine as a symbolic remembrance of Jesus's direction to remember him through this way. So, how do Christians celebrate Easter Sunday? Sunrise services are held outdoors. Churches are decorated in white and gold. White being a sign of purity and gold for royalty. And again, you've got to think about what that's saying about who Jesus is. Candles are lit to represent Jesus as the light of the world. Churches are decorated with spring flowers as a symbol of new life. Christians engage in Mass or communion, and Easter hymns are sung. Easter Sunday for some is said to be the most important day in the Christian calendar. It comes after Holy Week, where Christians have been reflecting and concentrating on God and asking for forgiveness. On Easter Sunday morning, their sadness is turned to joy as they celebrate the resurrection of Jesus from the dead. Now, what I'd like you to do is I'm going to give you 2 exam questions to focus on. You've got a 6-mark question here and a 15-mark question. The first question says, how might the remembrance of Easter enable Christians to better live out Jesus' command? So listen to the question, how might remembering Easter enable Christians to better live out Jesus' command, where he says to them, love others as I have loved you? So how might Easter and remembering Easter help Christians do that thing, that loving others? How might it help them do that? Then you've got a 15-mark question that says Christian is the most important Christian festival. And again, it's the same question that I asked you to do at the start, but now you've learned so much more and you've heard the explanations and the understandings behind it. Let's see if you can write that again. Much stronger response than the first one that you did. Much better response than the first one that you did. Using all the new knowledge you've learned. Again, use the structure to help you. Remember, the section that says my arguments, it's not your view. It's not your view, it's the argument you are presenting. It's the argument you are presenting. So arguments for this statement, arguments against this statement, develop your answers, write your responses, use the writing frame to help you and to guide you. Use the writing frame here, the 15-mark one, and you can use the 6-mark one as well for the 6-mark question. But make sure you use the bits from the writing frame to help you structure that response, or to help you make sure you get the depth coming through. The real depth, focusing on teaching, focusing on importance, focusing on different Christian traditions. Don't just focus on one. You want to focus on Protestants, Catholics, Anglicans, Methodists. You want to focus on 2 or 3 of them. You might want to focus on other traditions that relate to the response. Relate your responses back to the question. Give responses that support or oppose. Explain why they support, why they oppose. Give alternative views. Really get stuck in and secure the highest mark possible. And then once you've done that, I want you to go back and look at that frame I gave you for you to self-assess from the last lesson. I want you to look at that frame and see what band your response belongs in. In your opinion, what band do you think you are in? Make sure you get those questions to me. I'll mark them. Thank you very much, guys. Hope you're all well. Hopefully you enjoyed the lesson.